The funeral procession of Ozzy Osbourne on July 30th, 2025, in his hometown of Birmingham, England, delivered moments so emotional, so deeply moving, and so unexpectedly powerful that they will forever be remembered as one of the most extraordinary tributes to a music legend in history. What began as a planned public procession through the streets of Birmingham transformed into something far more profound and shocking than anyone could have anticipated. The events that unfolded as tens of thousands of fans gathered to say goodbye to the Prince of Darkness revealed the true depth of love and connection between Ozzy and the people whose lives he had touched for over 5 decades. The day started early, with fans beginning to gather along Birmingham's Broad Street from 10 p.m. the night before, determined to secure the best positions to pay their final respects to their hero. By morning, the crowd had swelled to unprecedented numbers, with estimates suggesting that over 50,000 people lined the streets of Birmingham's city centre. The sight was breathtaking, a sea of black clothing punctuated by purple accents, Ozzy's favourite colour, Black Sabbath t-shirts spanning 5 decades, and homemade signs expressing love and gratitude in dozens of languages. What was most shocking was the sheer diversity of the crowd, from elderly grandparents who had followed Black Sabbath since the 1970s, to young children wearing miniature band shirts, proving that Ozzy's influence truly spanned generations. The procession began at 1 p.m, and the first shocking moment came as the cortege made its way through Aston, Ozzy's childhood neighbourhood. The hearse, adorned with purple flowers spelling out Ozzy, flanked by his coffin, passed by his childhood home on Lodge Road, where fans had created an impromptu shrine with flowers, personal notes, and memorabilia. But what stunned onlookers was the presence of elderly neighbours who had known young John Michael Osbourne before he became a global icon. Mrs. Margaret Thompson, now 89, who had lived next door to the Osbourne family in the 1950s, stood at her front gate with tears streaming down her face, holding a photo of herself with young Ozzy from 1962. He was just a sweet, shy boy who loved music, she told reporters. Look what he became. Look how many people he brought joy to. If these opening moments have already moved you, hit that like button, because what happened next will absolutely astound you. The procession continued past Villa Park, the stadium where Ozzy had performed his final concert just weeks earlier with the original Black Sabbath lineup. Here, something extraordinary occurred that no one had planned or expected. As the hearse slowed near the stadium, thousands of fans spontaneously began singing Iron Man in unison, their voices carrying across the entire area. The sound was so powerful, so emotionally charged, that it could be heard for miles around Birmingham. Video footage captured the moment when Sharon Osbourne, visible through the car window, broke down completely upon hearing this massive choir of voices honouring her husband. The raw emotion of that moment, hearing 50,000 people sing the song that had defined heavy metal for generations, created an atmosphere of such profound grief and celebration that many attendees later described it as a spiritual experience. As the cortege made its way down Broad Street toward the Black Sabbath Bridge, the crowds became even denser. What shocked authorities was the level of organisation and respect shown by the massive crowd. Despite the overwhelming numbers, there were no incidents of violence or disorder. Fans helped elderly attendees find better viewing positions. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders, and complete strangers comforted each other as they wept. The Birmingham police later called it one of the most well-behaved large gatherings they had ever witnessed, a testament to the kind of community that Ozzy's music had created among his fans. The most emotionally devastating moment came when the funeral procession reached the Black Sabbath Bridge at approximately 1:30 p.m. The bridge and surrounding area had been transformed into a massive memorial site, with thousands of floral tributes, personal letters, bottles of Jack Daniels, toy bats, referencing Ozzy's famous incident, signed guitars, and even watermelons, an inside joke among longtime fans. The Boston Brass Band, which had been following the hearse while playing Black Sabbath classics, fell silent as the family stepped out of their vehicles to view the overwhelming display of love. What happened next shocked even those closest to the family. Sharon Osbourne, supported by her children Jack and Kelly, approached the memorial and spent nearly 10 minutes reading individual, messages from fans. Witnesses reported seeing her lips moving as she read each note, occasionally nodding or smiling through her tears. One message that visibly affected her was from a young mother who wrote, "Ozzy's music saved my life when I was suicidal at 16. Now my daughter and I listen to Black Sabbath together. Thank you for sharing him with the world." Sharon was seen clutching this note to her chest before carefully placing it back among the tributes. But perhaps the most shocking moment came when Sharon, Jack, Kelly, and even the typically private Amy Osbourne turned to face the massive crowd. Instead of simply waving, Sharon raised her hand in Ozzy's signature peace sign gesture, holding it high for nearly a minute as the crowd erupted in cheers, applause, and chants of "Thank you, Ozzy." The sight of this grieving widow, who had managed every aspect of her husband's career for over 4 decades, standing strong before tens of thousands of people and channeling his spirit through that simple gesture, created one of the most powerful and emotionally charged moments ever witnessed at a public memorial. What made this even more remarkable was the crowd's response. Instead of the typical chaos one might expect from such a large gathering, the fans responded with reverence and unity. Many lowered their phones and cameras, raising their own peace signs in solidarity. Others began singing, "Mama, I'm coming home," softly, creating a gentle, haunting soundtrack to the family's private moment of grief. The disciplined respect shown by the crowd allowed the family to have an intimate experience despite being surrounded by 50,000 people, something that seemed impossible but demonstrated the deep emotional intelligence of Ozzy's fan base. The procession included several surprises that even the family hadn't expected. Local Birmingham residents who weren't necessarily Black Sabbath fans came out of their homes and businesses to pay their respects, recognizing that they were witnessing a historic moment in their city's history. Shop owners handed out free water to fans who had been standing for hours. Local restaurants provided free food to those who had traveled long distances, and Birmingham City Council workers were seen helping elderly fans find places to sit. The entire city seemed to unite in honoring their most famous son. One of the most touching, unexpected moments occurred when the hearse paused near a group of disabled fans in wheelchairs who had been given special positioning near the bridge. Without any prompting, Ozzy's grandson, Sydney, Kelly's infant son with Slipknot's Sid Wilson, was carried over to meet these fans personally. The sight of this tiny child, representing the next generation of the Osbourne family, being introduced to fans who had followed his grandfather for decades, created a moment of such poignancy that even hardened metal journalists were reduced to tears. The international scope of the tribute was staggering. Fans had traveled from every continent to be present for the procession. The crowd included people from Brazil, Japan, Australia, and dozens of other countries, many wearing traditional clothing from their homelands, while also displaying Black Sabbath memorabilia. This global representation demonstrated that Ozzy's influence truly transcended cultural and geographical boundaries, uniting people from vastly different backgrounds through their shared love of his music. Technology played a crucial role in allowing millions more to participate in the tribute. The live stream of the Black Sabbath bench, which had been running continuously since Ozzy's death, saw over 5 million simultaneous viewers during the procession. Social media platforms crashed multiple times as people shared videos, photos, and personal stories about what Ozzy meant to them. The hashtag #ThankYouOzzy trended globally for over 24 hours, with celebrities, politicians, and ordinary fans all contributing their tributes. Perhaps most shocking was the revelation of just how many people's lives Ozzy had directly touched through his music. Throughout the day, local news crews interviewed fans who shared incredibly personal stories. A middle-aged man from Scotland talked about how Crazy Train had been playing on his radio when he decided not to commit suicide in 1995. A grandmother from Wales explained how she and her late husband had bonded over Black Sabbath albums, and now she played the same songs for her grandchildren to keep his memory alive. A young soldier spoke about how Ozzy's music had helped him cope with PTSD after returning from deployment. Story after story emerged of lives saved, relationships formed, and hope restored through the power of Ozzy's music. The economic impact of the funeral procession was also remarkable. Hotels throughout Birmingham and surrounding areas had been fully booked for days in advance, with many fans traveling hundreds of miles just to be present for the tribute. Local businesses reported their best single day of sales in years, as visitors purchased Black Sabbath merchandise, flowers for the memorial, and meals while waiting for the procession. The Birmingham Tourism Board estimated that the event brought over $10 million into the local economy in a single day. The logistics of managing such a massive crowd were extraordinary. Birmingham City Council had worked closely with the Osbourne family, who covered the costs of the procession, to ensure everything went smoothly. Over 200 police officers were deployed, along with hundreds of volunteers from local metal fan clubs, who helped guide crowds and distribute water. The city's public transportation system was temporarily overwhelmed, with additional buses and trains brought in to handle the influx of visitors. Remarkably, despite the massive numbers, there were no serious incidents or arrests, demonstrating the positive influence that Ozzy's message of unity through music had on his fan base. Medical teams were on standby throughout the day, and their services were needed not for violence or disorder, but for fans who became emotionally overwhelmed by the experience. St. John Ambulance volunteers reported treating dozens of people for dehydration, from crying and standing in the summer heat, and emotional distress. Many fans described feeling such intense grief and love simultaneously that they became physically overwhelmed. The medical teams noted that they had never seen such a combination of profound sadness and joyful celebration at a single event. The musical tribute provided by the Boston Brass Band was itself a shock to many attendees. The sight and sound of a traditional British brass band playing heavy metal classics like Iron Man, Paranoid, and War Pigs created a surreal but deeply moving atmosphere. The arrangements, specifically created for the occasion, somehow captured both the power of the original songs and the solemnity appropriate for a funeral. Many fans later said that hearing these familiar songs in such a different musical context helped them understand Ozzy's music in a new way, recognizing the strong melodies and emotional depth that had sometimes been overshadowed by the heavy production. The weather itself seemed to participate in the tribute. Birmingham had been experiencing typical British summer rain for weeks, but July 30th dawned clear and bright, with warm sunshine that lasted exactly during the hours of the procession before giving way to a dramatic purple sunset that fans interpreted as Ozzy's final blessing on the day. Meteorologists later confirmed that the weather pattern was unusual for the region, leading some to joke that even nature was paying its respects to the Prince of Darkness. The private funeral service that followed the public procession remained largely confidential, respecting the family's wishes for privacy. However, sources close to the family revealed that it was held at a small church in Gerrards Cross, Buckinghamshire, with only immediate family and closest friends in attendance. The contrast between the massive public celebration and the intimate private service perfectly reflected Ozzy's dual nature, the larger-than-life public persona and the devoted family man who had always prioritized those he loved most. The aftermath of the funeral procession has been as remarkable as the event itself. The Black Sabbath Bridge has become a permanent pilgrimage site, with fans continuing to leave tributes daily. The Birmingham City Council has announced plans to create a permanent Ozzy Osbourne memorial garden near the bridge, funded partly by donations from fans worldwide. A petition to rename Birmingham Airport as Ozzy Osbourne International Airport has garnered over 500,000 signatures, with city officials considering the proposal seriously. The cultural impact of the funeral procession extends far beyond Birmingham, or even the UK. Cities around the world with strong musical heritage have begun planning their own memorial events for local musical legends, inspired by the way Birmingham honoured Ozzy. The event has been studied by crowd control experts as an example of how to successfully manage massive gatherings, and by grief counsellors as a model for how communities can come together to process collective loss. The footage and photographs from the day have become some of the most widely shared images in social media history. Professional photographers who covered the event have donated their work to a permanent archive being created by the Birmingham Music Heritage Foundation. These images capture not just the scale of the tribute, but the individual faces of grief, love, and celebration that made up the crowd. Years from now, These photographs will serve as a testament to the power of music to unite people across all boundaries. Mental health professionals have noted an unexpected positive outcome from the funeral procession. Many fans reported that participating in the collective tribute helped them process their own grief about Ozzy's death and even unrelated losses in their lives. The shared experience of mourning and celebrating simultaneously provided a healthy model for dealing with complicated emotions. Support groups have formed among people who attended the event, bonded by their shared experience of this unprecedented outpouring of love and respect. The international media coverage of the funeral procession has been unprecedented for a musician's tribute. Major news networks from every continent covered the event live, with many describing it as a cultural phenomenon that transcended typical celebrity funeral coverage. The respectful, comprehensive reporting helped introduce Ozzy's music and message to new audiences who might not have been familiar with heavy metal, but were moved by the obvious love and unity displayed by his fans. What made the day even more shocking was the discovery of just how deeply personal Ozzy's connection was to his hometown. Throughout the procession route, fans encountered small plaques and memorials that had been quietly placed over the years, marking significant locations in Ozzy's early life. A small bronze plaque near his childhood home read, "Here lived John Michael Osbourne, 1948 to 1963, before he became Ozzy and gave the world the gift of heavy metal." These markers had been installed anonymously by the city council years earlier, but had largely gone unnoticed until the funeral procession brought international attention to them. The academic community has also been profoundly impacted by the funeral procession. Sociologists and anthropologists have begun studying the event as an example of modern ritual and collective mourning. The way that traditional funeral practices were adapted to honor a rock star while maintaining dignity and respect has provided valuable insights into how contemporary society processes the death of cultural icons. Universities around the world are developing courses that examine the intersection of music, culture, and collective grief, using Ozzy's funeral as a primary case study. Religious leaders offered varied perspectives on the funeral procession, with many noting the deeply spiritual nature of the event, despite its secular context. The Archbishop of Birmingham issued a statement saying, "While Mr. Osbourne's music might not have been traditionally religious, the love, unity, and hope displayed by his fans during the funeral procession demonstrated the very best of human nature. Sometimes the sacred appears in unexpected forms." This acknowledgement from religious authorities helped bridge the gap between traditional faith communities and the heavy metal culture that Ozzy had helped create. The economic ripple effects of the funeral procession continued for weeks after the event. Birmingham hotels reported being fully booked through the end of August, as fans who couldn't attend the original procession made pilgrimages to visit the memorial sites. Local music venues experienced a surge in bookings for tribute bands and cover acts, while record stores saw unprecedented demand for Black Sabbath and Ozzy solo albums. The long-term economic impact on Birmingham's tourism industry is expected to be substantial, with the city now marketing itself as the home of heavy metal to attract music tourists from around the world. The technological innovations developed for managing the live stream and social media coverage of the funeral procession have had unexpected applications beyond the music industry. The crowd monitoring systems, real-time translation services for international viewers, and emotional support chatbots developed for the event have been adopted by other organizations planning large-scale public gatherings. The funeral procession inadvertently became a testing ground for new technologies designed to help people share collective experiences across geographical and cultural boundaries. Environmental considerations were also addressed in a way that would have made Ozzy proud. The Birmingham City Council worked with environmental groups to ensure that all the flowers and biodegradable tributes left at memorial sites would be composted and used to create the planned memorial garden. The city also implemented a comprehensive recycling program for the massive amount of trash generated by the 50,000 attendees, achieving a 95% recycling rate that set a new standard for large public events. The day's events also revealed the extraordinary organizational capabilities of Ozzy's fanbase. Social media groups that had formed around his music spontaneously coordinated carpools, hotel sharing, and meal provision for fans who had traveled long distances. These informal networks proved so effective that they continued operating after the funeral, evolving into permanent support systems for fans dealing with grief, mental health issues, and other life challenges. The funeral procession had accidentally created a global community of mutual support that extended far beyond shared musical taste. International diplomacy was unexpectedly affected by the funeral procession, as government officials from various countries attended to pay their respects. The presence of diplomatic representatives from nations that don't typically have close cultural exchanges created opportunities for informal dialogue and relationship building. Music. Journalists noted that Ozzy had somehow achieved in death what many politicians had failed to accomplish in life, bringing together people from conflicting nations in a spirit of peaceful celebration. The scientific community also found unexpected connections to the funeral procession. Researchers studying crowd dynamics, acoustic phenomena, and mass psychology published papers analyzing various aspects of the event. The spontaneous synchronization of 50,000 people singing Iron Man provided valuable data about how large groups achieve musical coordination without formal direction. These findings have applications in fields ranging from disaster response to urban planning. The lasting impact on Birmingham itself cannot be overstated. The city has embraced its identity as the birthplace of heavy metal with renewed pride, launching educational programs in schools about the history of Black Sabbath and their influence on world culture. The Birmingham Symphony Orchestra has begun incorporating metal-influenced pieces into their regular repertoire, while local museums have expanded their exhibits on the city's musical heritage. The funeral procession effectively transformed Birmingham from a post-industrial city trying to find its identity into a proud guardian of one of the world's most influential musical movements. As the world continues to process what happened in Birmingham on July 30th, 2025, one thing has become absolutely clear. Ozzy Osbourne's funeral procession was far more than a goodbye to a beloved musician. It was a demonstration of music's power to create community, to heal wounds, and to bring out the best in humanity even during moments of profound loss. The shocking truth about Ozzy's funeral isn't found in any single dramatic moment, but in the accumulated evidence of a lifetime spent creating art that genuinely made the world a better place. The sight of 50,000 people from every walk of life, every age group, and every corner of the globe coming together in perfect harmony to honor one man's legacy proves that despite all the division and negativity in our world, music remains a universal language capable of uniting us in our shared humanity. Sharon Osbourne's decision to face that massive crowd and channel her husband's spirit through his signature peace sign wasn't just a gesture of gratitude. It was a promise that the love, unity, and hope that Ozzy's music represented would continue to inspire people long after his physical presence was gone. If this incredible story of love, loss, and the unifying power of music has moved you as much as it moved everyone who witnessed it, please show your support by hitting that like button. Ozzy Osbourne's funeral proved that when someone dedicates their life to bringing joy to others, that joy doesn't end with death. It multiplies, spreads, and becomes part of something eternal. The Prince of Darkness may have left us, but the light he brought into millions of lives will continue to shine forever, reminding us all that rock and roll isn't just music. It's a force for love, unity, and hope in a world that desperately needs all three.